Well, I want to welcome you to Elephant in the Room, and we're talking about the issue of sex, and this is our issue. God created sex, and it's a wonderful gift that He's given to us, but we live in a world that's fallen, in a world that is, very immoral in many ways, and it affects every person, every parent. And we're talking today in this session, in this message, about parenting in today's sexual world. Now, we have two guests with us, and believe me, you're going to learn a lot, because I did just in talking before this message. The world has changed. There's always been temptation, and there's always been need for parents to talk to their children about sex. Parents are the #1 educator in a child's life, whether you want to be or not. And a lot of times related to sex, we feel awkward, we feel, maybe a little bit ashamed of the topic. And because of that, maybe we don't say much, maybe we hand a book to them or something. In my case, when I was growing up, I never heard a word from my mom and dad, but I got my information from someone else, and it was bad information. As parents, the Bible tells us in Proverbs 22:6, and I'm sure you've heard this before, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. That is spoken to parents. Train up a child. It's not just talking, it is talking, but it's modeling. It's showing children right morals, not being prudes, because sex is a wonderful thing that God wants us to enjoy. But training our children up in, all the different areas of life, including sexuality. It's one of the most important roles that a parent has, especially in the day that we're living in. And we're joined by two experts on this subject. I'm thrilled to have them join us. First of all, Craig Gross. And Craig, you were with us last week. You're founder and pastor of XXXchurch.com. Great to have you with us.
Thanks.
So respect what you do. I just think you have a fantastic ministry. This weekend you ministered to our men at a breakfast. You're also going to minister to the church, and this is going to be shown on Father's Day weekend. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks.
Candy Gibbs, and also Candy, you're going to be with us again on another one of our messages, but Executive Director of CareNet Pregnancy Centers here in the Amarillo area. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
And you both have shared your story. You both have helped a lot of people. And now we're going to talk to parents specifically. And when I was talking to you, we were having a little conference call on this topic, and I just thought, man, I know everything, and I hung up the phone thinking, goodness gracious, I need to be brought forward about 10 years. The world has changed dramatically. And we were talking, and I was asking about when is the best time to start talking to your children about sex. And I was referring to a parenting expert who said around the age of 10. Okay, so Craig, you start, tell me what your response is.
I'm going to suggest between 7 and 9.
Yeah.
I think by 10, your kids have seen and heard about it from another source rather than you.
Right.
And almost get maybe even a little squirmy if you say, the first time I talked to my son, he was 7. And I just asked him, I said, Nolan, do you know what sex is? And I wasn't nervous at that point or scared, because I knew deep down he didn't know what it was. But he gave me that smirk, which he didn't give me that on any other question, which says that he's heard the word and he maybe just hasn't been brave enough or wanted to ask.
Right.
And, he said, well, there's a girl in my class that Nick says is sexy. And I said, well, Nolan, let's use the word cute. And I just went on to explain. But so he had a little sense of it, but had no idea about, the actual, what I was about to tell him. And so my take on it is I want to be the first person to talk to my kids about this, not the internet, not the 5th grade videos that are played at school, or not another kid.
Yeah.
And yes, it sounds kind of crazy for some of you, but my kid's not ready, or that's too much, or the fear if we do that, then that will maybe provoke more interest in it. No, I think an honest conversation.
Well, my son turns 36 tomorrow, and when he was 6, he came home. This is 30 years ago. He came home one day from school, first grader, and we were having dinner, and he said, Dad, what does blank mean? And it was the worst word you can think of.
Yeah.
And our daughter dropped her fork, and just we kind of went into shock around the table. And I said, Brent, it's a real crude word to describe this. And I just talked about sex, what sex was in a very simple way to a 6-year-old. And he said, that's what my friend said. And so that's 30 years ago. Today we have children with cell phones, with technology, and also accessing their parents' whether it's DirecTV or satellite television or cable television or something like that, and seeing inappropriate things. And so, what do you think, Candy?
One thing that I think is really important and says a lot about how you raised your kids, our kids play off of us. And if they feel like that those kinds of words or those kinds of conversations are off limits, they are going to get their information from somewhere else. So I agree between 7 and 9 to give them the full explanation. This is how it works. This is what it is. But before that, even, you need to use teachable moments.
Yes.
And when they see a commercial or they hear someone say something and they ask you, don't delay it and put it off till later, but give them just enough information they need to answer their question age appropriately. But it builds communication between you and them, which goes a long way the older they get.
Should a father talk to his sons and a mother talk to the daughters, or does it matter? In other words, there might be a single mom and or a single dad. They don't have the opposite sex there. So is it appropriate for any parent to talk to any child about sex? Or?
The way that we've done it, I have 2 sons and a daughter, and that talk where you explain all of the detail of it, my husband has done with the boys and I've done with Maddie. Right. But aside from that, if there are questions asked or if the conversation comes up, we both interject. I think that's important for them to hear both.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's interesting, if your wives or anything like my wife, like I told my wife, I have a boy and I have a daughter. And my older boy, I came home, told my wife we had to talk, and went well. My son was excited to tell mom too. Like Dad and I had a big boy talk because now he knows something.
Yeah.
Instead of when they're 12, they're like, yeah, I know it. And they're awkward and squirmy. He was excited.
Yes.
So my wife instantly starts kind of giving me the quiz, like, well, did you tell him this, and that? And I'm a guy. I talked a lot about the physical part. I didn't, and that's why I said to Nolan, I said, hey, mom's going to talk to you.
Yes.
Hey, guess what? We're going to talk to you together.
Yeah.
We're going to talk to you individually.
Yeah.
Especially around our house. We're going to keep this conversation.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't be like my parents when they didn't actually even do it, but they thought there was supposed to just be one talk.
Yes.
And then, we did it.
Yes.
Don't have the talk. You need to have the talks. And I think those... Eventually, as my daughter gets, she's now, a little bit older, this is not going to be every night dinner conversation, but this will be stuff that, together, we're not scared of it. Don't be so fearful. If you give good information, there's nothing to be scared of.
Exactly.
Well, and the devil, gets involved in this thing, in the shame, the fear, and all. But there's 2 fears that are so common, but one is like a father to his son being affectionate. They say, well, I don't want to be affectionate with my son, I'll make a sissy out of him. It's the opposite.
Oh, yeah.
Children need bonding with the same sex, and they need affection from both parents. We need to be affectionate. We need to be touchy-lovey. The other thing is, if we talk about it, they'll do it. If we talk too much about sex, I'm going to get them interested in it. They're interested anyway.
Right.
And the entire issue of the age between 7 and 9 is they're not embarrassed about it. And one of the things that I heard from a parenting expert was, as soon as they come into puberty, if you haven't established this as a subject that you're talking about, you're not ashamed of, you'll talk about any subject, they come into puberty, their body starts changing, they begin to have sexual feelings and all that, then they really go subterranean. And they begin to get their information from the internet, their friends, or things like that. And mom and dad are ashamed of this, so I don't want to talk about it.
That's right.
So it's not a one-time issue. It really starts, like in our case, it started when our son was 6. But Karen and I both talked to both of our kids about it, about the issue of their anatomies, about the issue of dating and when it was appropriate to date and why. And Candy, we're going to talk about this in just a minute. Not just that you shouldn't have sex, but the whys. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So let's talk about the relationship. Okay. So how important is it, the relationship you have with that child in the context of telling them about sex? In other words, let's just say that you have an authoritarian, kind of a distant parent trying to tell a child what to do. Does that work?
No, I don't think at all. Like, to me, I didn't want to approach the conversation of like, Nolan, I want to tell you about something that you can't do. I want to tell you about this gift that is amazing, and in the context, how great this is, and kind of show them the boundaries, and explain them more, but not. I I found, especially for kids at this age, they hold on to every word.
Right.
They believe you, they trust you. I mean, they're not 12 and 13 and 14 and they know it all already.
Yeah.
Like, so they're going to value, I feel like, that you're talking to them. They're going to come to you with questions. We had an example where somebody brought pornography on an iPod to school, and they started showing it around. This was in third grade, and this happened last year. And Nolan came home to me as soon as I picked him up, and he said, "Dad, this kid from school was showing porn." And I said, "Oh, wow." And he said, "Yeah, my best friend, he saw it." And he was just kind of bothered. So I call his best friend, and we're close to their family, and I just say, "Hey, man, did your son talk to you today?" And he's like, "No, what do you mean?" I was like, "Did he talk to you about school?" And he's like, "No." And I said, "Well, I don't know about you, but have you ever had this conversation with your son?" He's like, "Oh, no, I've got to like 5th grade to handle that."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, here's what happened. I've talked to my son about it, and I've told him if you ever have a question or see something, like it's the first thing out of his mouth at home, we start talking about it." And because it's not off limits. Where his friend, because they'd never had a conversation, doesn't run home because he's kind of embarrassed and he thinks he might get in trouble. And then it was just like super odd conversation with me and his father just going, "Well, there's not a better time than now."
Yeah.
And it was just like, now you're playing from kind of behind the 8 ball instead of like getting out in front of it.
Absolutely. And what you're saying is so healthy about from the beginning. You're their guide, and this is what it's saying, train up a child in the way they should go, so that he's not going to be ashamed of this issue. And if he has a question to ask, he's going to come to Dad or come to Mom, and that's what ought to happen. Candy, what do you think about this in the context of relationship, like with your family?
I think relationship is the most important component of dealing with any issue, but certainly sex. If it weren't, then the way that we've tried to cover sex would work, which is we feel like in a community, if we could get all the teenagers to the Civic Center, get the right speaker to say the right words one time, then those kids would go, "You know what, you're right, we shouldn't be having sex, and we've got it."
Yeah.
But it doesn't work like that because it isn't informational only.
Yeah.
It is relational. And that's why if it isn't coming from parents and it isn't open conversation in the home, I can remember my oldest son is quite a bit older than my younger two, 7 years difference. And we have always, because of my occupation, been very open in our home with the topic of sex. And Jake, the younger, was in kindergarten. And Tanner had come home from football practice and had a bruise on his neck. And he sat down at the dinner table. He goes, "I just want you to know that that is from football practice, from my helmet, and it's not a hickey." And the 5-year-old says, "What's a hickey?" And Tanner, like Julie dropping the fork, is like, "Please do not tell him at 5 years old what a hickey is." And well, we are, because secrets are not good. And anytime they feel like you're afraid to talk, it breeds shame.
It does breed shame. That's right. It sends the wrong message.
I know some parents too, to that example, are fearful. Like, we don't want our kids, I always say to my daughter, like, stay small, don't grow up.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's that sense of like, time's flying. I mean, Nolan's now just going into 5th grade, and you're like, where has this time gone? And I think part of that is like, if we think we're avoiding this conversation, then like they're staying young. And there's some of it. I mean, Nolan came, we've encouraged these ongoing conversations. If you've got questions. So he's like, "Dad, I got a question. Do you and Mom still have sex?"
Yeah. Or was it just twice?
And I was, but I was like, "Yes, Nolan, did you not understand the conversation? Why do you think you go to bed at 7? And, but then Jeanette, my wife, just kind of, she overheard the conversation. And so part of her just kind of laid back down and go, "I wish they could stay small." But in reality, I could never ask my parents those kind of questions. But having that openness, I hope that stays as they grow older.
Well, I can tell you that it does, because with our children in their late 30s, is that it always was an open conversation when they got to be in college, when they got to be married and all that, in an appropriate way. We're just not ashamed of the subject. And again, it's kind of what I do too, because it's what I do, we didn't have that shame. But Karen and I both talked about it, and then it translates to their kids, where they parent in the same way. You're teaching them not just how to grow up, but how to be a parent, because they're more than likely going to be like you when they grow up. Now let's talk about something very important that you guys have helped me on. Parents, we're living in a different world technologically. Okay, technology, terminology to some degree and the permissiveness that's in the world today. When I grew up, you know, the good girls didn't. And today, there's a lot of pressure on boys and girls to be sexually promiscuous. But let's talk about technology. Now, little kids today are growing up, there was not the internet when I was growing up, to say the least. And so you had to go somewhere to find pornography, wherever it was, or to buy magazines or whatever. Today, a child can have a telephone, and on that telephone, sexting, accessing the internet and porn. I heard one statistic that said that 60% of all teenage boys have porn apps on their telephone, and I think it could even be higher than that. A lot of girls do too. So we're living in a different world. So Craig, how is this world different than maybe mom and dad grew up in?
It's so different. You know, and even I've been in this, XXXchurch.com started 11 years ago, before Google, before, you know, I mean, that was before even MySpace. And now we've moved way beyond, you know, now with Twitter and, you know, mobile technology. I mean, it's so hard even for us to keep up. And I know as a parent, it can seem exhausting. But if you go and you get your kids these devices or these electronics are in your house, you have a responsibility to understand it. You know, my dad just passed away, but he would always say, refuse to get online. Like, I'm not going to do it. I've never needed to. But if we can't take that approach these days, because if your kids are around this, so you've got to be aware of, you know, when they say they're talking to their friends online, don't just assume those are kids from school. Those are strangers that they've maybe never talked about. So one of the things that, you know, I'm not trying to scare you parents, but if your kids are on the internet unsupervised, yeah, it's a great babysitter, so you think, but they're going to have access to a whole world that is dangerous. You know, my son came home, he said, Dad, can I get this app? I hold the password for their iPods. And I've told him, he knows the password, he figured it out. But I said, no, the day you download an app, I get an email, that's the last day you have an iPod. So I trust you enough. But he said, hey, Dad, can I get this app some of my friends have? And I'm always curious, you know, like, what's the latest thing? And he's like, Snapchat. And I just laughed. I was like, absolutely not. Dad knows way too much about that. This is an app that sends a photo of you and it disappears in 7 seconds. It's used primarily by kids and primarily for, you know, sexting, inappropriate photos. Why on earth? No, just send a, you know, to your friends, you'll be allowed to send a normal photo that doesn't disappear. But it was just like, no, this is the stuff that as a parent, trends and things are exhausting in a sense to kind of keep up with. But when your kids are online, you have that responsibility and you're their parent, so don't be afraid to ask.
Let me ask this question. What is the appropriate age, do you think, for a child to have an iPod? My granddaughters are 11. They have iPods, not the iPhones. And they have the filtering on there, the protections. What's the appropriate age for a phone or an iPod, do you think?
I think it's different for a phone than it is an iPod. And I think that an iPod where they're listening to music and things where you have the password and you control the apps that they have and that kind of a thing, I think, you know, elementary age is fine for that, as long as they're not able to download things without you approving them. But cell phones are a totally different issue to me. And even if we remove all sexual content, cell phones have taken over our families. You go to a restaurant, you see kids and parents on their phones completely disengaged from one another. It's my opinion that when your kids spend 8 hours a day in school, when they come home, you need some time. It doesn't need to be that they're on the phone, on the iPod, on the computer. You need to interact as a family. And I think delaying the cell phone, we've got kids in 1st, 2nd grade getting smartphones. That doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, and it's interesting, my wife, for years, finally just said, I gave her my old iPhone, but for years, she's that woman that said, I walk into the cell phone, store, and I want the phone that only dials, and so it's a challenge. Go in your local store and try and find the ones that aren't smart, and those are limited. So now, your kids are convincing you that that's the phone they want, and so if they're carrying around that, they have to have a data plan. Very dangerous. I try and prolong that. Oh, we need it for emergency. They don't need the iPhone 5 for an emergency.
No.
And when it comes to your iPod, a lot of parents are unaware, like you get it out of the box and it's like, give it to them. Absolutely not. The first thing you need to do, I mean, my kids 7-year-old and a 10-year-old have iPods. First thing I did was disable Safari.
Yes.
So they're not, and then I control the apps that are downloaded, so they could download another browser, but I would see it. So Safari kills the internet. Where it's like, no, you use the internet on our family computer that has a filter when lets you. You don't
Not a computer alone.
Yeah, we don't need the computer in your hand connected
Yes.
online. So that's a big thing. Parents are like, wait, you know, I've talked to a lot of parents. My daughter just really loves her iPod and she loves the music. I'm like, I bet she has her own email account. She's got a Facebook app. All the things that you told her she can't do, she's doing that. And
Yes.
sure enough, I said, just grab her iPod. And they saw that, yeah, she had a Gmail account. She had all this. So
And my 5-year-old granddaughter can hide all the icons on my iPhone.
Yes.
And I said, and when I hand her the phone, I say, Kate, you can't use this if you hide my icons.
Yeah.
She's smarter than me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My 19-year-old or 19-month-old grandson can turn it on with his parents sitting there, turn the iPhone on, swipe
Slide it.
find his apps and use them
Yes.
at 19 months.
Yes.
And so, and again, this is all supervised. I want to say this to parents. Don't trust your children. And I'm not saying be mistrustful, but I'm saying the devil's real. And even innocent children, you put a phone into their hand, good kids, good Christian kids, and you put an iPod into their hands or an iPhone in their hands, you think they're good kids. You know, we can trust them. You shouldn't. And I'm not saying be mistrustful, but exactly what you guys are saying. You have to, if you don't understand what you're handing them, don't hand it to them.
Absolutely.
You've got to get to know it. Now, are there, I know XXXchurch.com, and Candy, your website is?
It's candygibbs.com.
Okay.
And we've done recently a week-long series on technology, and there are lots of links for good information about how to get security methods for your cell phone and the internet.
Great.
One idea I'd like to add about the cell phone that we've actually done and it works well is, because when you talk to parents, here's what they say to me, well, if my child doesn't have a cell phone, I won't know when to pick them up from their activities or their games or whatever. Which, I mean, we didn't have cell phones and we got picked up every time on time. But if that's your concern, we have an extra phone at our house that doesn't belong to anyone. It's not a smartphone. And if you are going to be late at a game, you take the phone. Or if my daughter's riding bikes, she takes the phone. But it's no one's phone to give a number out or, you know, that kind of thing. And that's worked very, very well.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I think as well on XXXchurch.com/parents, we have a number of PDFs that you can download. Some of these topics you might be watching going, I don't even know, what is sexting? What is smartphone? Like, so we have some documents that you can download that really explain some of these critical issues. And then we have some actually software that, you know, to me, I'm telling you, hey, for your younger kids, don't even jump into the software, just disable this. But as the kids get older, we've got something called X3 Watch, which is an accountability software that you can get some more information about that.
Okay, let's talk about the permissiveness. And we were talking about the issue of you're teaching your children you shouldn't have sex before you get married. Candy, you made a couple of comments I thought were interesting. One is you run these pregnancy centers that you're dealing with. Girls a lot of times have crisis pregnancies.
Right.
And you were saying a lot of these young ladies that are coming in are saying, I wish my parents would have had higher standards.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. We just did a research project with college students. And we asked them, you know, what were you prepared for when you went to school? And what do you wish would have been different growing up? And over again, they said, I wish the bar would have been set higher.
Yeah.
It's not enough that I don't have intercourse until I get married. I needed the bar to be set higher.
Yeah.
And I think really with permissiveness, we as parents own a lot of this, and we don't even realize what we're doing. But we start with kids when they're 3 and 4 years old at Mother's Day out, and we say things like, oh, isn't that cute? Look at his little girlfriend. Well, what we start telling them when they're 4 years old is people notice and think it's cute when you have a little relationship.
Yeah.
Well, then it escalates into having a cell phone, and I'm sending text message to boys in 3rd grade. And then in 6th grade, I'm going out on dates.
Okay, give your statistic.
Okay, in the 6th grade, if a girl begins dating, and that means my parents are dropping us off at the movies in groups, I do have a cell phone, we're going out kind of a thing. 91% of the time, she will have sex before she graduates from high school.
If in the 6th grade there is a normalization and acceptance of opposite sex relationship
Yes.
going on, bonding going on, whatever level. So at that early age, it basically begins the process of them on that path that's going to end up wrong.
Yes.
91%.
Because sex is progressive. And we all know this. But we have scientifically discovered 12 steps from eye contact to full-blown sexual intercourse.
Yeah.
So in 6th grade, we begin that. And we go step 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we break up. And I get a new boyfriend. I'm starting on step 4 because that's where I'm comfortable.
Okay, so let's say, Candy, that your child comes home and says, everybody's doing it. How do you deal with peer pressure to parents? You are going to have the nerdiest child on earth if you do. This is what our kids are telling us, is everyone's doing it. If I don't get to do it, I'm the only one not doing it. How do you deal with that?
Number one, I think it's important that you communicate early. Things like, we're not going to have a cell phone until this point, so that they kind of know what they're looking at. Right. But secondly, I don't want my kids to be a nerd either. I want them to have a good experience and be healthy and interactive and all of that. But I do want my kids to be different.
Yeah.
And I hear parents say, I don't want them to be left out and I don't want them to feel different.
Absolutely. I don't want them to be left out. I don't want them to be different.
But yes, you do want them to be different.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, from the thousands of kids that we both interact with, you do not want your kids fitting in and being one of them.
Absolutely.
And the thing about it is, being different means that I am the influencer. I don't have to just be the one that's left out. Why can't we train our kids to be the influence?
You bet.
To be the ones that says, no, having sex before you're married is not cool. Be the leader.
Yeah.
Stop being afraid and begin to take action to equip them to lead.
What do you think?
One thing I've noticed kind of in my family, there's the mentality of like, I just want to shield my kids from everything and guard them. And I wish we lived in a world where that was possible. But to me, we have a lot of examples in the world today, and I would say they're not very good ones. Mm-hmm. And so what I would challenge parents, and what we've used kind of effectively, I think, in our family, is to use everyday opportunities as learning experiences. Right. And so one example, my son is a huge Justin Bieber fan. About a year ago, a girl came out against Bieber and said, I'm pregnant with your kid. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to disappoint my son if that was actually, so it was like, oh, but it was on every news for like a week. And finally he came to me and said, Dad, is it true? And, you know, I was like, what are you talking about? And he tells me, and it was like, no, let's talk about that. And, you know, as we talked about that, the implications of if it was true and how would that happened and what do you think? But rather than, and yeah, it would have crushed him, obviously. More, it would have crushed, obviously, Bieber and his family and all that. But it was like, man, I wish I didn't have to talk to you about this. But in a sense, yeah, this is a real story that's going on. Let's talk about that. Like, that's why Nolan, like, you know, hey, it wouldn't be a good idea to be alone with a girl somewhere. It wouldn't be this. And we're able to then kind of twist or turn experiences and people that they see in the media or the stars that they look up to that are doing it wrong, that you're going, no, this is, you know, this is how we want to kind of go after it. And so as that opportunity we used, and obviously Bieber came out of it and he said, you know, it wasn't his kid and all that worked, but it was like, I wasn't going to just, I'll wait till that passes. Let's talk through this.
All kinds of teachable moments. It's the best way to parent is just one event at a time. Yes. And doing the right thing, because they start asking questions early, they start being inquisitive early. We begin that conversation, and also when well-known people fail and they do something wrong, it's just an opportunity to say God loves them as much as He loves us, but that doesn't work. Right. When the Bible says, you know, the wages of sin is death, that's what it's talking about. And so we can teach that. Now there's two things, we have a few minutes left. One is teaching the whys, okay, why you wait to have sex, because it's a big deal. Mm-hmm. The other thing is the issue of dating. Now we said in the 6th grade, you don't want your children beginning that process of budding up with the opposite sex, a romantic relationship on any level at that age. What is the appropriate age, and what's the appropriate way?
I'll tell you the statistics to follow that. If dating begins in 8th grade, 53% of the time they'll have sex before graduation. 10th grade, it drops to 20%.
16 years old.
16. And I do think that it's not okay to just think, well, when you turn 16, here are the car keys, now you can go out on a date. But one of the most powerful things you can do as a parent is to date your own kids and let them learn what it's like. I mean, we've done that where my sons ask my husband, can I take mom on a date? Here's where we're going. We should be home about this time. He comes to the door. He opens the car door. He's learning how to pay a ticket, you know, a check at dinner. He's learning how to buy movie tickets. All of those things, not only is that modeling appropriate behavior on his part, but he knows that when he takes a girl on a date, and he may fail, he may have sex before he gets married, but he understands the magnitude of what he's doing, that that young lady is priceless to her family. So I think that's important. But the other thing I would say is time spent together like that, communication like that, and asking the Holy Spirit to teach you how to be a parent. There's nothing more powerful than that. I think that as parents, we get to the place where we feel like we want to talk when I pick you up from school and at the dinner table. And usually that's not when kids want to talk. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. It's, you know, when you're getting ready to go take your bath or whatever. The best idea that the Holy Spirit ever gave me was when I had a 14-year-old and we just weren't singing off the same sheet of music. And I just started to pray about how to connect with him. And I had the idea to set my alarm for 2 o'clock in the morning. And I went in and woke him up at 2 o'clock in the morning. And at first, you know, he thinks this is the dumbest thing that's ever happened, but it has become a tradition in our family. And we've done things like have nachos in the kitchen. We've laid out in the front yard and looked at the stars. But they realize what we're willing to do as parents to know them. And it's
the biggest deal of
valuable.
all. It's the biggest deal of all, the relationship.
No, I think this is great. You know, I'm going to write some of this stuff down. Because as Mike, you know, like I said, my oldest is going into 5th grade. And I asked him, he's got this, you know, girl that came over, you know, his family friend. And I said, Nolan, so girls aren't cute at this age at all. He's like, Dad, that's so 5th grade. And that's why I was like, oh, you're in 5th grade. But then I've noticed with girls, the 4th grade girls are after the 4th grade boys already. The boys are not interested, supposedly now. But I feel like the girls get there even sooner than the guys. And you look at the TV shows that are for kids, they're all about relationships. And so, as long as you can hold back and not force that, not encourage that, you know, that's why, I don't know, for some odd reason, my son has, you know, he's had a couple great girl friends. And then, you know, in 2nd grade, so 3rd grade, it's all right. This past year, their other friends are making fun of that, and it's almost hurt their relationship because she does, well, no, she's not your girlfriend, Nolan, you're 4th grade, and like, I wish they didn't have that pressure, but that's a pressure that, if you as the parent can just not force that at all, and just, man, in time, I'd say, the longer you can wait, you know, the better.
They don't need that complication that young.
No.
But the other thing is the whys, and we have just a couple of minutes, but let me say, if you work in a pregnancy center, sex has consequences. And whether it's oral sex, because this is something that I heard the other day about an elementary school, a group of kids in an elementary school that 5th grade had an oral sex party, thinking that was safe, when it's all but safe. It's very, very dangerous and can cause a cataclysmic, you know, diseases and problems later on. But the other thing is pregnancy. Candy, you had the experience of having sex young, getting pregnant in high school, and the guy abandoned you that did that, which resulted in an abortion you're going to talk about in another couple of messages and give your testimony in that. But the point is, sex is consequential. And Shanti Feldhahn was here a couple of weeks ago, and she was talking about the issue that when a couple has intercourse, like a 14-year-old boy and girl have intercourse, immediately the dynamic of the relationship changes. Not only is there disease, not only is there the risk of pregnancy, but he immediately afterwards begins to mistrust her. And she immediately afterwards begins to feel insecure that she's going to lose him. And it becomes a highly dysfunctional relationship. In other words, it just doesn't work. If it worked, let me tell you, if sin worked, I'd still be there. You know, because I was good at it. It just didn't work. There was an emptiness to it. What would you guys say about the whys, teaching the whys?
I think that we have spent years telling kids all the why you shouldn't. because pregnancy and disease are out of control. 1 million teens every year get pregnant. 400,000 of those end in abortion. The disease rates would blow you away. And some of these diseases are lifelong and life-altering.
Yes.
Just like you mentioned with oral sex, we are seeing a rise in disease in people's mouths.
Yes.
Because oral sex is what everybody's doing. The consequences are huge. But what we've got to learn to articulate is the blessing of waiting
Yes.
is as huge.
Yes.
And we're not asking you to wait out of fear of getting pregnant or getting a disease. But we're asking you to believe what God has said will be your heritage and your blessing if you wait. Because that is a gift that is so intimate and powerful that is only meant for marriage because it pays huge dividends. And our kids can understand that.
Yeah.
We're wrong to assume that they're all going to have sex, they're all going to rebel.
You bet.
Wrong.
You
bet. Yeah.
Holy Spirit in them is greater
Yeah.
than the fear or the consequence. There is a good side.
Yeah.
And I think communicating that's key.
That's wonderful.
I think for you parents to share not only your values, but your testimony
Yes.
is key. Once again, the random conversation last week with my son. My wife's good friend, her daughter just got pregnant at a young age. So we started talking about that, and then he just, had the opportunity to tell him. And I told him before that I waited till I was married to have sex. But Mom didn't choose that same path. And so we came home, anyways, I told Jeanette, hey, I told him. And at first she's like, you told him? I was like, hey, Jeanette, we have two different stories that we're able to both talk about from a different perspective.
Right.
And instead of like, I don't know, I never knew anything about my parents or about this. They just don't do this. But and we both have a testimony in that. And you have something very powerful that, what you learned. And you're going to be able to, I don't want you to just, have the kids guessing. I wonder if they did this or how they, no, I'm going to share from experience.
Yeah.
On and we got this one covered from both sides, so we're gonna talk to you about that openly of areas that maybe we failed or we did this where we felt really good about these things, these choices that we make. So as parents, we don't have to pretend that we did it all right. I'm getting older, but I always tell my kids, like, I'm not much. I remember being a kid still, and it's like, no, we're on to your tricks, we're on to this stuff, but just.
That's why you have kids early, so you can remember.
Yeah, you can remember. But
that's
just being honest with your kids and sharing your heart. Yes, the truth from the Bible, but also just this is why I'm sharing this, because man, I know from experience. You got to trust us on this one.
Well, thank you both so much for being here. Wonderful advice. Craig Gross, pastor founder, XXXchurch.com. Go to that website. A lot of information there. CandyGibbs.com. Candy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And CandyGibbs.com. And there's a lot of information on there that we haven't been able to talk about. But what we're trying to do is empower you as parents to be better parents, period, but also to understand what's happening in the world and to kind of compare notes on the best practices, the biblical way to raise children in today's sexual world. You may not feel qualified. You may have made your own mistakes, and you may be going through things right now. That does not disqualify you. Turn to the Lord. He can turn any mess into a wonderful family, a great marriage, successful children. And He begins right now. The devil wants you to believe that you're not qualified, you can't do it, you've made too many mistakes. That's baloney. I had made just about every mistake. But God can use you if you simply say, these are your children and I'm your servant.
Yes.
And as parents, we want to do the best job, and we're not accountable to our kids' friends, and we're not accountable to our kids, we're accountable to you. To raise these children, to be different, to be believers. And we want our children to have the best experience, but sin will never lead to the best experience, but the Word of God will. We hope that this has been an encouragement to you. Our pastors, our internet pastor, is going to come and pray for you. God bless you.